Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I am your host and facilitator, Mark Wallace, here with you on intellectualradio.com, coming to you every Monday night from 7 o'clock till 9. You can also find us at Apple Podcasts, and you can also get us at iHeartRadio. If you want to look or listen to the broadcast again, and we are also on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. It is time for the facts. I've been saying this for a few weeks now, and it is time for us to get to it. So tonight, we are going to share with you the facts. And we're going to continue doing that all the way up to the election. It is important that you get the facts as opposed to all of the misinformation, the pictures, or the opinions that people have based on where they may be emotionally, where they may be based on something that they've heard somebody say to them and they have not verified the truth, or based on someone's confusion. We're going to get past that. But tonight is going to be the start of dialogue, of going through the facts and going through painstakingly to give you the information so that you're not confused about what the facts are when you go and you make your decision, or when you're having conversations with people who may be griping for one reason or the other. All right. So, and then you'll certainly be able to join in the conversation. Certainly, I'll be looking at your posts and that sort of thing. I also want to make sure that you all understand the importance of what it is that we are doing. And of course, we have to continue. We have to continue, building, because there are great opportunities that are existing. After you hear just some of the information that I'm going to put forth tonight of what has happened over the past 3.5 years under the Biden-Harris administration, we have some information going forward, or we have some opportunities going forward that we, the people, must get involved in order to make sure that we, the community, we, the people, we, the Black community, because I'm speaking largely to the Black community, that we have to be involved in the process. And what I mean by that, being involved in the process, is that the president, the administration, the vice president, Congress can pass legislation, get bills passed on the federal level, and then the administration and those in the president's administration will distribute the monies to the states. So federal, state, local, that's where we have to be. We have to get involved, because once it is done at the federal level, it comes to the state where we are. And we have to be organized in such a fashion to make sure that those investments Don't pass our communities by as they have in times past. We've got to be involved in that process. The president, whoever the president is, in this case, it's Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris, and you have Congress who have passed legislation and sending money to the states. And I'm going to go through the first phases of monies out of these pieces of legislation that's coming directly to Illinois and what they're coming to Illinois for. So now we can get ready and then prepare ourselves to make sure that those investments get planted in our communities to build our communities for the future, giving people the help that they need in the communities where we live to eliminate poverty in the communities where we live and around us, to deal with the mental health, to deal with whatever we are lacking, access to internet, lead pipe elimination, all of these. I'm going to go through those tonight. Not opinions. I'm going to go through that information that we have worked hard to compile. Now, we are not going to get through all of it, but I guarantee you that between now and way before the election, I, as someone that you look to for information, are going to provide you with information. I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. I will, however, tell you what I think we should be doing based on what has been done. Because I believe, and I'll tell you that right now, that you're going to hear information that you can go and verify, but you're going to hear information that it would be an absolute travesty for us to be confused, thinking that going the opposite direction is going to be beneficial for the future. What I suggest is that we ride with what is happening now, with the great things that have already taken place, and we reset them for the next term, and then we strengthen and fortify ourselves to push even harder for those things and those policies and those investments to be even made greater. And they will be made greater. But we have got to play the long game. We cannot have knee-jerk reactions and keep kicking ourselves and losing any modicum of progress. Politics and being involved in the process of government is a process, and it takes a while. But there has never been in our lifetime something as aggressive as we have in these opportunities that we have now. And I am going to go through them with you. So for the next hour, 50 minutes, I am going to go through some details, and then I'm going to go through what and how that is impacting Illinois and those investments that are coming directly to Illinois. So we have gone to the United States Treasury Department that has released a report on the historical, equitable economic recovery from the pandemic and how those recoveries, in those policies, and in those bills, how they are impacting Black communities. We are going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about all of them, but we're certainly going to be getting to them. So I want to get to that. We may not get to portions of it tonight, but in each one of the broadcasts that I do going forward is to provide you with nothing but the information so that you can take the information, you can digest the information, and even if you don't believe the information, you can go verify it. Because the information that I'm going to give you is not information that is hidden from you. It is information that you can go and you can research and you can find and you can verify. Because my responsibility to you is to provide you with the facts. I can give you an opinion, but my opinion has to be rooted in something substantive, in factual information that could be supported. An opinion is not just I throw something in the air because, oh, this is the way I feel. The way I feel doesn't have any thought. It doesn't have any basis of factual data. It just wants to be satisfied. That's what feelings are. But I want to give you some information that you can feel good about, that you can think about, you can process, and you can go and verify it, and then you can share it. So this is a report as of October 23rd, 2023, thus far. And then we are going to bring you updated information. This is from the federal level. And this is a report that shows that President Biden's American Rescue Plan effectively delivered resources and aid historically to underserved communities, which enabled economic recovery for more quickly than in any previous downturn in the country. Today, the United States Department of Treasury released a report providing new evidence that the recovery from the economic harm of COVID-19 pandemic was the most equitable recovery in recent history. The report also includes new department research alongside new data released by the Federal Reserve Board that finds that the speed and strength of the response by the Biden-Harris administration helped to thwart the worst economic outcomes anticipated from the COVID-19 shock for Black and Hispanic families, and that across the board, a broad array of economic indicators, the financial well-being of Black and Hispanic families have remained strong relative to recoveries in recent history. The report also shows that as the Biden administration policies have driven historic economic recovery, we have also been building the economy we need for the long haul, one that allows all communities to reach their economic potential, according to the Deputy Treasury Secretary Wallace Adeyemo. The report shows the progress we're making on building a more equitable economy, narrowing the racial wealth gap, and addressing enduring inequities in wealth accumulation as we continue to implement the Investing in America agenda. We remain committed to capitalizing on the progress made during the recovery and investing in people, places, and the infrastructure that have been far too long often left behind. Prospects for the American economy look grim. At the beginning of 2021, the professional forecasters expecting elevated unemployment to linger and the output to remain well below the trends. Had these pessimistic forecasts been realized, Black and Hispanic households would likely have experienced a disproportionate amount of economic pain during economic downturns. Black and Hispanic Americans have historically faced unemployment rates increase are larger than those faced by other groups. But that pessimism was proven wrong, especially for those households too often left behind. President Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan effectively delivered resources and aids on historically underserved communities, enabling economic recovery more quickly than in previous downturns. As a result, the nation experienced a historically equitable recovery from the pandemic. For example, unemployment rates for Black and Hispanic individuals recovered far more quickly than in past recessions. The real earnings grew twice as much for these workers as they did in 3 years following the onset of the Great Recession. Household wealth for Black and Hispanic Americans also significantly increased relative to prior downturns, and racial wealth gaps narrowed between 2019 and 2022. From 2019 to 2022, the median wealth adjusted for inflation rose more than 60, 47, and 31% for Black and Hispanic and white families, respectively. These three gains were some of the largest in the history of the Survey of the Consumer Finances, and in stark contrast to the 3 years following the onset of the Great Recession, when real wealth fell for all three groups. Within 20 months after the COVID recession's peak, both Black and Hispanic unemployment rates were lower than were at the same time in previous recoveries, and have stayed lower through most recent data. The gaps between Black and white and Hispanic and white unemployment rates have closed substantially, dropping to near their historic lows in 2023. During the COVID recession and recovery, the 3-year growth rate of real earnings of full-time workers was 4% for Black workers and 2.4% for Hispanic workers. Foreclosure rates have remained low in the COVID recession. The recovery contrasts to the Great Recession, when they rose significantly. Between 2019 and 2022, Black, Hispanic, and white homeownership rates rose 2.9%, 1.2%, and 1.1% percentage points, respectively. This occurred despite interest rates increases, which raised the cost of borrowing beginning in early 2022. In comparison to homeownership rates fell over the Great Recession and rose by less for Blacks and Hispanic households in the 2001 recession and recovery. Black and Hispanic rates of business ownership skyrocketed in this recession, moving up by 6.2% and 2.8 percentage points to their highest recorded readings at 11 and at 9.8%, respectively. These were the largest increases seen in the history of the Survey of Consumer Finance. This was the report that came from the U.S. Department, released by the report in October 23rd. Now, and some of those, well, we saw that in the previous administration, And I'm going to try very hard not to focus on that because I just want to focus on the facts. I just want you to get the facts. All right. So now, over the past 3 years, President Biden and Vice President Harris leveraged the full force of the federal government. We have seen the sizes of these 4 pieces of legislation that have generated billions of dollars of investment across the board. And like I said, I'm going to go through what those investments were and specifically what the investments are just in the first phases of them that's coming to Illinois. And I think in contrast, on another broadcast, I'm going to show what some of those investments, I may be able to do that tonight, to show what some of those investments were in red states where Republicans are that voted against any of these policies. Now, there was one of the policies that there was some bipartisan support, but they were largely voted against by Republicans. But they're all benefiting from these policies that got passed. And of course, they're all bragging about them. So over these past 3 years, what they've been able to do to ensure the promise for all communities, including Black communities across the country, with support of these great efforts, Black Americans are starting new businesses, creating jobs, buying homes, and taking advantage of increased education opportunities at historic rates, contributing to a 60%. Now again, you can go and verify all this information at the U.S. Department of Treasury, contributing to a 60% increase in wealth compared to before the pandemic. And this boom in wealth creation following the pandemic is helping to drive a historically equitable economy recovery. And in part of that recovery from promoting entrepreneurship to increasing access to home ownership and delivering the lowest Black unemployment rate, from proving it's possible to reduce child poverty to historic lows, to expanding access to quality, affordable health care, from advancing voting rights and police accountability, to ensuring equal access to high quality education with historic funding for historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. President Biden and Vice President Harris has committed to investing in the future of the Black community all across this country. Now, let's start with the HBCUs. This administration has invested $16.5 billion in HBCUs. $16.5 billion in HBCUs in this administration. Now, I'm just going to lay it out and go through it. I'm going to try not to give too much commentary, but sometimes it needs to be put into context. $16.5 billion to the previous administration, which zeroed it out in their budget, and it took Alma Adams out of South Carolina to put it back into the budget, which was $250 million. And of course, they needed to have Walter Kimbrough, who was a two-time president of HBCUs, to explain this to the Trump administration, why this was important. Their budget people had zeroed it out of their budget. So for those people who like to brag about what happened under the Trump administration, it was because of Democrats that it got put back in. And of course, Trump signed it. And of course, he's going to take credit because he's the president. Growing economic opportunities for Black families and communities through President's legislative victories, including the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the President's historic executive orders on racial equity. The Biden-Harris administration is ensuring the federal investment through the President's landmark Investing in America agenda are equitably flowing to communities to address long-standing economic inequities that impact people's economic security, health, and safety. And this vision is already delivering huge results. These are some of the things that's coming out of those bills. Out of those bills powered a historic economic recovery that created 2.6 million jobs for Black families, now at a rate of 2.9 million jobs for Black families. The lowest unemployment rate on record and the lowest gap between Black and white unemployment on record. Helped Black working families build wealth. Black wealth is up by 60% relative to pre-pandemic, the largest increase on record. Cut in half the number of Black children living in poverty in 2021 through the ARP's child tax credit expansion, which was voted against by every Republican. This expansion provided breathing room to the families of over 9 million Black children, began reversing decades of infrastructure disinvestment, including with $4 billion to reconnect communities that were previously cut off from economic opportunities by building needed transportation infrastructure and underserved communities, including Black communities. Connected an estimated 5.5 million Black households to affordable high-speed internet through the Affordable Connectivity Program, closing the digital divide for millions of Black families. Helping Black-owned businesses grow and thrive. Since the president entered office, a record 16 million new businesses applications have been filed. 16 million. And the share of Black households owning a business has more than doubled. According to the Small Business Administration, building on his momentum, the Biden-Harris administration has achieved the fastest creation rate of Black-owned businesses in more than 30 years. More than doubled the share of Black business owners from 2019 to 2022. Improve Small Business Administration's flagship loan guarantee programs to expand the availability of capital to underserved communities. Since 2020, the number and dollar value of the Small Business Administration backed loans to Black-owned businesses have more than doubled. Launched a whole of government effort to expand and access federal contracts for small businesses, awarding a record $69.9 billion to small disadvantaged Black businesses in 2022. I've got to read that again. The Biden-Harris administration launched what they call a whole-of-government effort to expand access to federal contracts for small businesses, awarding a record $69.9 billion to small Black disadvantaged businesses in 2022. Through the Treasury's State Small Business Credit Initiative, invested $10 billion to expand access to capital and invest in early stage businesses in all 50 states, including $2.5 billion in funding and incentives allocations dedicated to support the provision of capital to underserved businesses, with $1 billion of these funds to be awarded to jurisdictions that are most successful in reaching underserved businesses. Now, what that means is, while they cannot use racial identity to move these dollars, what they did was use the language to make sure that they're reaching the areas that are most underserved, which are largely Black communities. This was language that was crafted by and led by Kamala Harris through this act, as well as through the Pell Grants for HBCUs, which is 95% of Black students who go to college use Pell Grants. And so that language that she used, which is going to disproportionately help Black students get relief from student loan debt. This was all coming through the Biden-Harris administration. Helped more than 37,000 farmers and ranchers who were in financial distress, including Black farmers and ranchers, stay on their farms and keep farming. Thanks to resources provided through the IRA allowed $3.1 billion for the Department of Agriculture and the USDA to provide relief for distressed borrowers with at-risk agriculture operations with outstanding direct or guaranteed Farm Service Agency loans. The USDA has provided over $2 billion and counting to timely assistance, supported small and disadvantaged businesses through the CHIPS Act, funding by requiring funding applicants to develop a workforce plan to create equitable pathways for economically disadvantaged individuals in their region, as well as a plan to support procurement from small minority-owned, veteran-owned, and women-owned businesses. They also created the $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund that will invest in clean energy projects in low-income and disadvantaged communities, increasing access to housing and rooting out discrimination in housing markets for Black communities. Hold on a second. Somebody keeps calling me, and let me just turn this down so I don't keep getting so. There we go. All right. So increasing access to housing and rooting out discrimination in housing markets for Black communities. To increase access to housing and to root out discrimination in the housing market, including for Black families and communities, the Biden-Harris administration has set up the first ever national infrastructure to stop evictions, scaling up to the ARP funded emergency rental assistance program in over 400 communities across the country, helping 8 million renters and their families stay in their homes. Over 40% of all renters helped are Black. And this support prevented millions of evictions, with the largest effect with the largest effect seen in majority black neighborhoods. Published a proposed affirmative furthering the fair housing rule through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, which will help overcome patterns of segregation and hold states, localities, and public housing agencies that receive federal funds accountable for ensuring that underserved communities have equitable access to affordable housing opportunities. Created the Integrity Task Force on Property Appraisals and Valuations Equity. This is where Black communities have been constantly undervalued by lowballing appraisals or by discrimination by appraising properties, the same or similar properties at, in some cases, 30 to 40% lower. There was a study that was done on 47 million appraisals, and it was found that they consistently lowballed very similar homes with similar social economic conditions, similar style and conditions that were consistently lowballed by Black owners as opposed to their counterpart whites. That's what this policy is attacking, providing the resources for that. Which is a first. And of course, I've spoken with the state senator here, LG Sims, about putting something into place, and they're working on putting something into place so that our communities can show equitable growth just as well as other communities, white communities on the north side of Chicago. The first of its kind of the interagency effort to root out bias in home appraisals process, which is taking a sweeping actions to advance equity and remove racial and ethnic bias in home valuations, including cracking down on algorithmic bias and empowering consumers to take action against valuations, taking additional steps through HUD to support wealth generation activities through prospective and current homeowners by expanding access to credit by incorporating a borrower positive rental payment history into the mortgage underwriting process. HUD estimates this policy change will enable an additional 5,000 borrowers per year to qualify for a FHA insured loan, which is the Federal Housing Authority. So if you don't have any credit and you need to have credit, and of course your credit scores, and you need to have a payment history in order to get a loan, you will be able to use on your credit report. You can report your rental history, your rental payment history on your credit report. That's why if you are paying your rent, you should not be paying in cash. You should use a certified check, and now that we're electronically, you can Zelle those payments, but you need to keep a real clean record so that you can use that information so that it works for you positively. That's what that program will allow. Ensuring equitable educational opportunity for Black students, to expand educational opportunities for Black communities in the early childhood and beyond. The Biden-Harris administration has done the following: approved more than $136 billion, with a B, $136 billion in student loan debt cancellation for more than 3.7 million Americans through various actions, and launched a new student loan repayment plan. The savings on a valuable education save plan to help many students and families cut in half their lifetime payments per dollar borrowed. which means that someone coming out of college will not be strapped with paying a student loan for 20 or 30 years, which in many cases, students are coming out of college and not able to buy a home. They have to put off buying a home because they have a mortgage, which is their student loan. That's what these programs, $136 billion, is going to help to eliminate. Now, we're just starting. We're just starting to see these kinds of programs. Why in the world would we try to use what I call this purity attitude or this purity posture to undo all of this? If the other group gets into office, all of this goes away. All of it goes away because they will take all of these billions of dollars that are being given to support Black communities and Black families and Black students, will be bundled to give tax breaks, which they have already announced that they're going to do, to the wealthiest people and the richest people in the world that don't need it. That's what these dollars will do. They will shift these to go to a preferential few people rather than helping the masses, which helps our entire economy to lift itself up out of the doldrums. Why would we go back? They championed the largest increase in Pell Grants. This is signature Kamala Harris. Championed the largest increase in Pell Grants in the last 10 years. A combined increase of 900 to the maximum award over the past 2 years, affecting the over 60% of Black undergraduates who rely on Pell Grants. Fixed the public service loan forgiveness program, so all qualified borrowers get the debt relief to which they are entitled. More than 790,000 public servants, now that number has increased, public servants have received more than $56 billion in loan forgiveness since October 2021. Prior to these fixes, only 7,000 people had ever received forgiveness through the PSLF. Let me read it again. $56 billion in loan forgiveness since October 2021. Prior to these fixes, only 7,000 people had ever received forgiveness through the public service loan forgiveness. 790,000 people. Before that, only 7,000 people had received this. They delivered a historic investment of over $7 billion to support HBCUs. In the initial investment, to date, that number has doubled to 16, more than doubled to $16.5 billion to date to HBCUs. Reestablished the White House initiative on advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for historically Black colleges and universities, and the White House initiative on advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Black Americans. Through the ARP, secured $130 billion, the largest investment in public education in history, to help students get back to school, recover academically in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, and address student mental health. Secured a 30% increase in child care assistance funding last year. Black families comprised 38% of families benefiting from the federal child care assistance. Additionally, the 28% of children and pregnant women who benefit identify as Black. People wanted to know what the president has done and what the administration has done for Black families. Again, you can verify all of the information that I am giving to you. All of the information I am reading to you, we've researched, we've gotten this information directly from the government sources and these reports, and you can go and you can verify them. Let's look at improving the health outcomes for Black families and communities. To improve health outcomes for the Black community, the Biden-Harris administration has done the following: increased Black enrollment in healthcare coverage through the Affordable Care Act by 49%, or by around 400,000 from 2020 to 2022. Helping more Black families gain health insurance than ever before. Through the IRA, locked in lower monthly premiums for health insurance, capped the cost of insulin at $35 per covered insulin product for Medicare beneficiaries, and helped further close the gap in access to medication by improving prescription drug coverage and lowering the drug cost in Medicare, allowing for the federal government to be able to negotiate the cost of drugs. The ARP expanded postpartum coverage from 60 days to 12 months in 43 states and Washington, D.C., covering 700,000 more women in the year after childbirth. Medicaid covers approximately 65% of birth for Black mothers, and this investment is a critical step to address the maternal health disparities. Finance projects that will replace hundreds of thousands of lead pipes, helping, and just keep that in mind. I'm going through this summary because we're going to get through the specifics to Illinois. Finance projects that will replace hundreds of thousands of lead pipes, helping to protect against lead poisoning, disproportionately affects Black communities. Provided 264 grants with $1 billion in Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act funds to more than 40 states to increase the supply of school-based mental health professionals in communities with a high rate of poverty. They launched an unprecedented whole of government equity agenda to ensure the promise of America for all communities, including Black communities. President Biden believes in advancing equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equity opportunities in the responsibility of the whole of our government, which will require sustained leadership and partnership with all communities to make the promise of America real for every American, including for the Black community. The president has done the following: signed 2 executive orders directing the federal government to advance an ambitious whole of government equity agenda that matches the scale of the challenges we face as a country and the opportunities we have to build a more perfect union. Nominated the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, and more Black women to the federal circuit than every president combined. The president has nominated the first Black woman, who is now serving on the Supreme Court. The president has appointed 208 people to the federal bench. 58 of them are Black. 58 of them are Black. 28. Was it 20? Is it 58? 58? I'm sorry. Yes. 58 of them are Black. 37 Black women. 21 black men. Now, before people get into a tizzy, the reason why there were more black women than there were black men, because in every other presidency, there were always more men appointed to the bench than women, in particular, black. 58 of the 237 federal appointees in the Trump administration, they appointed 4% of black people to the bench. 237 appointments to the federal bench, 4% black. 237, 4% of that is 9.8 or something like that of the 237. Joe Biden, 58 of the 202 people and counting that he has appointed to the bench, including a black woman to the Supreme Court. Continuing, countered hateful attempts to rewrite history, including the signing of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, establishing Juneteenth as a national holiday, and designating the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument in Mississippi and Illinois. The Department of Interior has invested more than $295 million in infrastructure funding and historic preservation grants to protect and restore places significant to Black history. Created the Justice 40 initiative, which is delivering 40% of the overall benefits to certain federal investments in clean energy, affordable and sustainable housing, clean water, and other programs to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized by underinvestment and overburdened by pollution as a part of the most ambitious climate conservation and environmental justice agenda in history. Protecting the sacred right to vote for Black families and communities. Since their first days in office, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have prioritized strengthening our democracy and protecting the sacred right to vote in free and fair and secure elections. To do so, the President and Kamala Harris signed the executive order to leverage the resources of the federal government to provide nonpartisan information about the election process and increase access to voter registration. Agencies across the federal government are taking action to respond to the president's call for all of the government effort to enhance the ability of the eligible Americans to participate in our democracy. Repeatedly and forcefully called on Congress to pass essential legislations, including the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, including calling for an exception to the filibuster to pass voting rights legislation. Increased funding for the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, which has more than double the number of voting rights enforcement attorneys. The Justice Department also created an election threats task force to assess allegations and reports of threats against allegations or election workers and investigate and prosecute these matters where appropriate. Now, I said I'm going to go through all of this because I think that it's so important to go through this so that we can understand the gravity of the work that we don't hear about. You're not going to hear about in the news. You're going to hear sound bites about this. right? And even on some of the talk shows and some of the podcasts, you're only going to get sound bites. I want you to understand in some level of totality the details of what comes through these policies and what their initiatives are and the work that is going on by the many thousands of people who are working in the federal government that you never hear about. But this all stems from someone who has a plan and someone who has the power to put these in action. So the president matters. The president has enormous weight, and it has enormous power, and it has enormous latitude to direct agendas. So the president signed into law a bipartisan Electoral Reform Act, Count Act, which establishes clear guidelines for a system of certifying and counting electoral votes for president and vice president to preserve the will of the people and to protect against the type of attempts to overturn our elections that led to the January 6th insurrection, addressing the crisis of gun violence in Black communities. Gun violence has become the leading cause of death for all youth and Black men in America, as well as the second leading cause of death for Black women. To address this national crisis, the president has launched the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention and taken more executive actions on gun violence than any president in history, including investments in violence reduction strategies that address the root causes of gun violence and address emerging threats like ghost guns. In 2022, the administration's investment in evidence-based life-saving programs combined with aggressive actions to stop the flow of illegal guns and hold shooters accountable yielded a 12.4% reduction in homicides across the United States of America. Signed into law, the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the community's significant gun violence reduction legislation that enacted in nearly 30 years, including investments in violence reduction strategies and historic policy changes to enhance background checks for individuals under the age of 21, narrow the dating partner loophole in the gun background check system, and provide law enforcement with the tools to crack down on gun trafficking. Secured the first ever dedicated federal funding stream for community violence intervention programs, which have been shown to reduce violence by as much as 60%. These programs are effective because they leverage trusted messengers who work directly with individuals most likely to commit gun violence, intervene in conflicts, and connect people to social health and wellness, and the economic services to reduce the likelihood of violence as an answer to conflict. Enhancing public trust and strengthening public safety for Black communities. Our criminal justice system must protect the public and ensure fair and impartial justice for all. These are mutually reinforcing goals to enhance equal justice and public safety for all communities, including the Black community. The president has done the following: signed a historic executive order to put federal policing on the path to becoming the gold standard of effectiveness and accountability by requiring federal law enforcement agencies to ban chokeholds, restrict no-knock warrants, mandate the use of body-worn cameras, implement stronger use of force policies, provide de-escalation training, submit use of force data, submit officer misconduct records into a new national accountability database, and restrict the sale or transfer of military equipment to local law enforcement agencies, among other things, to restrict the sale of those. Taking steps to right the wrongs stemming from our nation's failed approach to marijuana, and by directing departments of health and human services and the justice to expeditiously review how marijuana is scheduled under federal law, and in October of 2022 ensured categorical pardons for prior federal and DC offenses of simple possession of marijuana, and in December 2023 pardoned additional offenses of simple possession and use of marijuana under the federal and DC laws. While white, black, and brown use marijuana at similar rates, black and brown people have been arrested, prosecuted, and convicted at a disproportionately higher rates than whites. He announced over 100 concrete policy actions as part of a White House evidence-informed multi-year affirmative or alternatives rehabilitation and reentry strategic plan to safely reduce unnecessary criminal justice systems interactions so that police officers can focus on fighting crime, supporting rehabilitation during incarceration, and facilitating successful reentry. Those are some of what this administration has done. Now, let me go to some of the specifics. I'm going to go to some of the specifics. Some of the specifics as it relates to Illinois. The president investing in America. This is a part of, not the whole, this is a part of. Remember I told you there's $57 billion that are going to be coming to Illinois. Let me just give you some of what the report and the details that I just read to you all came from the Biden-Harris administration. And I tell you again, if you think that these kinds of policies and these kinds of initiatives will come through Republicans, you're confused. Somebody has misguided you, certainly misinformed you, that that's not what will happen, and that's not what happens when Republican administrations are in power. In fact, what has happened under this administration, this Democratic-led administration, has been more aggressive than any Democratic administration in modern time. And I, for one, never expected that I would be as impressed with how this administration has been able to make these accomplishments and taking the measures that they've taken. Never. But they have. And I contend that all of the years of Joe Biden's being in Congress, and in particular the 8 years that he served as vice president to the Barack Obama administration, he witnessed some things in that 8 years that I believe transformed and transcended his view on how he is governing as president. I believe that it absolutely shaped. That's why I don't have any problem with this age thing, because I believe as we all get older, we get wiser. We certainly should. And especially if you are a person who is one who is working to do better, be better, and contribute better. So I don't have a problem with age, because with age comes wisdom, experience, wisdom. So you should have learned a lot that helps you to lead differently. And I firmly believe that with this administration. So let's go to President Biden's Investing in America agenda and what it is delivering to the state of Illinois. $8.4 billion in private sector commitments and $16.6 billion in public investment in clean energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing under this administration as of April of 2024. We're now talking about Illinois. I may end up just making some comparisons if we have time in this broadcast, but on the next broadcast, I certainly want to show you how this administration's investments are working in other states that voted against them. But they're bragging about them because they know that they're good for the future of the health and the economic health of the people in their states. $2.1 billion. This is now, we're talking about specifically Illinois. We're not talking about any places. We're talking about Illinois. $2.1 billion in funding from the Biden administration to provide affordable, reliable, high-speed internet to everyone in Illinois. That means in all of our communities where we don't have broadband, 2.1 billion. This is just the first phase. This is just the first phase, $2.1 billion to power internet to every community. $11.1 billion for transportation investment in roads, bridges, public transit, rail, ports, and airports, as well as electric school buses and transit buses and EV charging stations. Now look, you heard we say airport. There's an airport that we've been trying to get built that will bring huge economic infusion and be transformational for the South region, as well as the South side of Chicago. This is all coming from the Biden administration. $2.6 billion in private sector commitments to invest in electric vehicles and batteries. You heard about the battery plant that is going up in Kankakee. We need to have those kind of investments on the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago. The southeast side, we have 400 acres, more than 400 acres, almost 600 acres, where the U.S. Steel site. We need to attract some of these industries to come because we have the dollars to give them the kinds of support and subsidies that they will bring their industries and hire people from our communities to have careers that they can retire from, starting in salaries of $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year. 4.8% unemployment rate with 455.1 thousand new jobs created under the Biden administration for Illinois. 455,000. The average salary is $84,000 a year. These are careers where they're starting at $84,000 a year. We need that kind of economic infusion. We need that kind of economic confusion on the south and west sides of Chicago. That's why I said we have to be involved. We cannot sit on the sideline and spectate, because these resources, while coming to our state, will pass our communities if we are not organized and if we're not making the kinds of demands or understand what is coming to our state. $1 billion to provide clean water across Illinois and to improve the water infrastructure, which includes $337.1 million dedicated to replacing toxic lead pipes. Chicago Union Station. These are some of the spotlights, some of the projects spotlights. Chicago Union Station will receive a total of $94 million across two projects for upgrades to its passenger rail platforms. Both projects will add capacity to the station, reduce delays, and to prepare Chicago Union Station for the future rail expansions and increased service. The city of Chicago has been awarded $144 million to rehabilitate 4 bridges over the Calumet River on the south side of Chicago. The Department of Energy awarded up to $1 billion to Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana for the Midwest Hydrogen Hub. This hub will produce clean hydrogen from the renewable and nuclear energy and natural gas with carbon capture. And it will be used for industry such as steel and glass production, transportation, and power generation. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is investing $829 million in the upper Mississippi River system, which forms the Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa border, to strengthen supply chains and to make it easier to move critical goods like grain. The project will build a new 1,200-foot lock and modernize its existing locks and dams. Infrastructure. We're again talking only about Illinois. This is nowhere else. And this all comes from the Biden-Harris administration. $15.7 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding has been announced in Illinois and awarded for 488 projects. $15.7 billion in infrastructure law funding has been awarded to Illinois for 488 projects. 488 projects, $15.7 billion coming from the federal government, from the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration, through the infrastructure law, and is providing $15.7 billion for 488 projects. These projects would include $11.1 for transportation, $16.7 billion for roads and bridges, $2.9 billion for public transit, $494.1 million for airports, $268.6 million for ports and waterways, $1.6 billion for high-speed internet, $982.5 million for clean water, including $337.1 million to replace toxic lead pipes, $249.8 million for clean transportation, $107.3 million for EV chargers, $52.1 million for clean transit buses, and $90.3 million for clean school buses. $239.7 million to clean up legacy pollution, $1.4 billion for resilience to strengthen our community's readiness for climate impacts and other threats. Energy and climate under the Biden-Harris administration for Illinois. Private companies have announced $8.5 billion in commitments to invest in 21st century industries, including $4.9 billion for clean power projects, including solar, wind, and batteries, $416 million for clean energy and manufacturing, $1 billion in public funding has been announced for grants, rebates, and other initiatives to accelerate the deployment of energy, clean energy, clean buildings, and clean manufacturing. This is not exclusive of the clean energy tax incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act. Lowering costs, $263.7 million in home energy rebates to cut energy costs by weatherizing homes and replacing old appliances with more efficient appliances. This is if you replace your furnace or your air conditioning units. If you put in 90 plus or 95 plus, you can get rebates back. So the president is putting that kind of money in, $263.7 million. So if you make sure you check with your local representatives to make sure that you can get access to those funds. $2.4 million in seniors and other Medicare beneficiaries will save money on prescription drug costs because of the president's $2,000 yearly cap on out-of-pocket prescriptions, drug cost, a $35 monthly cap per insulin prescription, free vaccines, inflation rebates, and a drug price negotiation program. 399,000 individuals in Illinois signed up for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act marketplace during the open enrollment period for 2023 and will benefit from average savings of about $800 a year from lower health care premiums. These are just some of the investments that are coming through the policies of the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration. Now, I'm not going to go into more of this tonight, but we are going to continue to bring you and to roll out information. But I have just given you, what I've just given you is information that you can go and verify. It's not opinion, it's not fodder, it's not fiction. These are the facts of what has come through and out of the Biden Harris administration. While many people distracted on talking about migrants, got you watching gay people, got you interfering in a woman's right to choose what's best for her with her doctor, got you moralizing in somebody else's business, got you tricked to thinking that somehow the alternative is better. That administration, if they came back into power, all of what I just read to you will be it. That will be it. This is just a start. This is just a start. If we are wise and focused, if we want for reparations, or some part of reparations, whatever the measure is, there's a part of that here. But if we want more of that, and we want to see real results of that floods through our communities, then we don't change horses and get on the back of a horse that doesn't care anything about you, that's going to buck you as soon as you get on that horse, and as soon as they get into power, they will dump you as they have always done. If you didn't know that information before, you now have it. This portion that I just gave you, this portion that I just shared with you. Now, it is my hope that I have reached out to the Biden campaign staffers. I've reached out to the DNC because I want to bring on people that we can expand the discussion, that can explain and educate us on more of these things that have been initiated by this administration. I want for us to be profoundly informed about what is, and not about what's hypothetical, and not about what is fictional or farther, or somebody's axe to grind, or somebody who just wants to be profound and sometimes profoundly ignorant. Now, with all of these resources that have been allocated to Illinois, it is your responsibility and my responsibility and our responsibility to make sure that a significant part of those resources don't pass our communities. And the only way that we can make that happen is that we have got to be organized, and we have got to put ourselves in a position so that we can influence whoever it is, whether it be Brandon Johnson, whether it be Tony Pretwinkle, whether it be Governor Pritzker, or a mayor in your village, or a state representative, or a state senator. In order for us to have the kind of influence to be able to make those demands, we've got to organize. That's why I put it up on the screen. If you are not in the text alert, text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 so that you can receive the Zoom meeting links. Now, I am hoping this week we may, and we're going to try to meet in person because we have to distribute material and shirts and all that sort of thing. Because we're going to be participating in some Juneteenth events and some other events that I have been made aware of. So we have to organize ourselves together. So the idea is, let's build the block. Let's build the voting block so that we have a mass number of people in the block. We have a mass number of people in the block, and in the block, with a mass number of people, we can make demands and make sure that those demands are met. I mean, with the billions of dollars that are coming through that I just read to you, $8.4 billion, $16.6 billion in funding, 16.7 billion, 488 projects that I just talked to you about. All that money is coming to the state. And we can now not blame Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or even Donald Trump, for that matter. We now have to look to ourselves to say, what is it that we are responsible for doing in order to make sure that these funds don't pass our communities, that we bring plants, attract industries to come to Inglewood, to come to Roseland, to come to the west side, to come to the southeast side, to bring industries, thousands of jobs, paying $85,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, careers that we can help get our most vulnerable and at-risk young men and women into careers where they're no longer on the streets, having to resort to what I call high-risk activity of crime that leads to violence, that leads to shootings and killings. Let's kill poverty. Let's kill the lack of opportunity. Let's destroy unemployment for Black young men in Chicago between the ages of 18 to 25. Even though those national numbers have gone down. In Chicago, with $15.7 billion, a total of $57 billion over the next several years, we can destroy all of those negatives that persist in our communities. But we've got to get focused on those negatives. You can't focus on gay people. You can't focus on abortion or some woman's health choices between her and her doctor We can't focus on migrants because with all the migrants that are here, we still are getting these billions of dollars that are coming for projects, for people to get careers who don't have careers, who would like an opportunity. So the little, let's see, $50 million that everybody was making such a stank about, $100 million. We're talking about $15.7 billion, $11.1 billion, $1.6 billion, $982 million, all to invest in Illinois that have nothing to do with migrants, has nothing to do with abortion, has nothing to do with gay people. I hope you get the point that we've got to get focused on what's important to making sure that these resources don't pass our communities. Period. That's where it is. That's where I believe it is. And that's what these times present great opportunity for us to transform and transfix our communities by getting focused and getting organized and going after the people who are in charge of investing those dollars equitably. That is Governor Pritzker, Juliana Stratton, Brandon Johnson, Tony Pretwinkle, your alder people, your commissioners, your state reps, your state senators, your United States senators, your United States Congress people, your village mayors, your village managers, your village trustees or council people. These are the people that we have to be focused on. Not gays, not people abortions, not migrants. These are the people and these are the offices that we have to focus on. Why? Because they're the ones who are getting these billions of dollars that are coming in to disseminate them. And we, as the voting public, as the constituents, are the ones that are responsible for being organized to making sure that our communities don't get passed over. Now, what you going to do? What are you going to do? What are we going to do? Now, you've got some information that you probably have not had in as detail as we have provided for you tonight, and that's just a part of, because it's going to continue. I'd like to know, what are you going to do? I went out today, well, certainly I ordered on Friday. We ordered a bunch of shirts. 50. 10 by 10 to win. 10 by 10 to win is the platform by which we can build and organize so that we can focus on the things that really matter to changing the dynamics of our communities so that our communities can thrive, so that we can repair the breach that has lingered for so long in our communities. All right, look, that's going to do it for me tonight. I know that we normally go a little bit longer, but I thought that it is important. I think that it is really important that from now until election time, that I bring you factual information as it relates to what's coming out of this administration and why it is important for us not to derail the train, but to make the train work better and to make sure that the train doesn't pass us by. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. All right, look, that's going to do it for me tonight. I want to thank all of those who stayed with us. I want to thank you all for being here. Look, we're in the month of June. Juneteenth is coming up. We got some events that we're going to be participating in. 10 by 10 to win. I want to ask all of you if you would certainly show up to the meeting this week. If you see it on the screen there, text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385, or you can email me at mark@10by10towin.org. That is the collaboration of bringing us together, building a mass voting block across our communal lines, across our ward lines, across our village lines, wherever we live, whether we're in the city or the suburbs, and we build this mass voting block so that we can organize to make the kinds of demands that we need to make, to send a message to those people who are in the public offices that those investments, billions of dollars, need to be, and we want them invested in our communities, providing economic opportunities and jobs for the people in our communities, that we can eradicate poverty and the impoverished conditions and those negative indices that poverty produces. We're going to produce the enrichment of our communities rather than the decay. That's what this is all about. So text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 so that you can receive the Zoom link and participate in our weekly meeting, organizing us to strengthen us so that we can lift our communities up out of the doldrums and take advantage of what is happening and what is before us. What is before us has never been before us, and we have never been included in that. The New Deal during the FDR, that deal, he went to the Appalachians to promote that. Black people were not included in the New Deal of FDR. This New Deal, Black people are included, and opportunity is available, but we have to make sure that it doesn't pass us by and that we don't miss the opportunity. We have to make sure that you and we have to do this. That means we have to be focused. That means we have to be organized. That means we have to be strategic. We have to be consistent. And we have to be demanding that our communities are responded to and respected. All right, look, that's going to do it for me tonight. I want to thank everybody for being here. on this edition of the People Show. Facts over the fiction, despite any misinformation, disinformation. I want you to be fueled with the facts. I want you to be empowered with real information that you know that you can go out and that you can inform and educate and explain to the people who trust your voice. Again, this work that we are doing is not a second string job. There are no second stringers. Everybody is a first stringer. And if you are sitting on the sideline as a first stringer, you weaken our ability to be stronger. So you got to get on the field of play, get active, and get involved. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. I'm going to be back with another edition of the People Show in probably a couple of days, bringing you new information, of course, with you every Saturday from 1 o'clock to 2 with Judge Leonard Murray for the People Show's Legal Hour, answering all of your legal questions from 1 o'clock until 2 p.m. every Saturday. All right. Listen, I want to thank all of you for joining me. I don't take it for granted that you take the time to tune in to the Monday night edition of the People Show. And we thank intellectualradio.com, Mr. Earl Winfrey, Wanda B. Thank you for the outlet. And we will continue to try and bring you great content every single week right here on the Monday night edition of the People Show. Good night.